Okay, hi everyone. So in this revision video, we're going to look over climate types. Okay, I started this in class with you. So different parts of the world have different climates, and each climate is different to the other. So it depends on where the climate is found. Is it at the equator? Is it up in the North Pole? What's the temperature? Is it really hot? Is it really cold? Do they get many hours of sunshine per day? And what's the levels of precipitation? Is there any precipitation at all? Do they get drought or do they get heavy rainfall? Do they get snow? So every climate type is different depending on your location in the earth. And then the climate that you do have influences what vegetation will grow in your region. So if you're in a very, very dry, hot desert climate, the cactus really will survive there. But if you're in a climate like Ireland where it's mild and moist and we get good amount of rainfall, well then you can sustain and grow, deciduous woodland. If you're in the desert, what animals can survive there? Well, the desert fox will survive there. He'll burrow underground during the day, come out at night when it's cooler. Whereas in our climate, it's more suitable to dairy farming and the cattle. And the lifestyle that people have, like the Mediterranean lifestyle, is meant to be one of the healthiest in the world. What you eat, you're eating all the fish and the salad, and you're out in the sun and you're getting vitamin D, and it's just a healthy lifestyle. Very good life expectancy. Whereas if you're living in the cold regions of the Arctic Circle, I would imagine your life expectancy mightn't be as long. That cold might be quite harsh on the body, and it really affects the type of housing that we live in and the clothes that we wear. Okay, so basically you have three types of climates if we're really just generalizing them. You've hot climates, you've temperate climates, and you've cold climates. The hot climates are located close to the equator, okay, in or around the equator. The equator is the central point of the earth. It's where the sun shines directly over it. Temperate climates are kind of in the mid latitudes. So basically they're just above those regions above the equator. So, and then the cold climates are just either at the north or the south poles. Okay, so there's different hot climates. Like you've three different types of hot climates. You've equatorial, savanna, and hot desert. The two types of temperate climates are the Mediterranean climate and the cool temperate oceanic. That's actually Ireland's one, cool temperate oceanic. And then the two names of the cold climates, you have tundra and boreal. So luckily we only need to study one climate type out of each. So the hot climate we're going to study is the hot desert. The temperate climate we're going to study is our own, the cool temperate oceanic climate. And the cold climate we're going to study is the boreal. Okay, so they're either a hot climate, they're temperate, so they're neither too hot nor too cold, and they're cold climates. So there's another map showing you the spread and distribution of the climates across the world. So basically the red shows you the hot climates right across the equator. The green shows you the temperate climates, so in the mid latitudes. Latitude is your distance north or south of the equator. And the blue shows you the cold climates, so in the north or the south poles. Okay, so like I said, we're going to study the hot climate, and the hot climate we're going to study is the hot desert. Okay, so the hot desert climate is the hot climate that we're going to study. So where is it located? Look at the map there in the picture. You can see the equator, the center of the earth. Hot deserts climates are located between 15 and 30 degrees north and south of the equator. So if you look at the equator line, and if you go about 15 degrees north of that, so between 15 degrees and 30 degrees north of the equator, and go below 15 degrees and 30 degrees south of the equator, that's where you'll find areas that suffer or that have a hot desert climate. Okay, so what can we learn about them? First of all, what you need to do, you need to be able to tell about their temperatures. How hot or how cold are they? And what precipitation do they get? We are also going to look at the vegetation that can grow there, the animals that can survive, and what's the way of life of the people. Okay, so let's look at the temperature first. Imagine in the daytime in the hot desert regions, like if you just look back there now a second, like the Sahara Desert would be the most common desert you would have heard of. You might have also heard of the Arabian Desert, the Australian Desert, the Atacama Desert in South America, and the Southern California Desert. So there's loads of famous and big deserts across the world. I suppose the Sahara one we'd be most familiar with. So if you imagine that their daytime temperatures can go between 40 and 50 degrees Celsius, like that is severe heat. So in the hot desert climate regions, their daytime temperatures can reach between 40 to 50 degrees Celsius. Why is that? Well, you've two reasons. Number one, because they're at the equator, well, they're 15 and 30 degrees north and south of the equator. So because the hot desert climate regions are so close to the equator, the sun is always shining directly over them. And when the sun is shining directly over them, the sun is high in the sky and it's concentrating its heat straight down over the region. Okay, so that's giving it the direct heat of the sun. Because if you look at the diagram there on the left hand side, when the earth is orbiting around the sun, okay, the part closest to the sun is the bulging out part. So that's the equator. Okay, so that's going to get the direct heat of the sun. The other regions are located further away from the heat of the sun, so they're at a distance. So they're going to get the heat over a longer distance, over a larger area, so they don't get as much heat. So anyone at the equator, it's bulging out towards the sun, so the heat's rays get there faster and they're shining directly over it. So they get temperatures between 40 and 50 degrees during the day because they're at the equator, the sun shines directly over them, and the sun is it's high in the sky and it's concentrating its sun rays heat down on top of that area. Also, they've cloudless skies. So if you've no cloud cover, the direct heat of the sun can get straight in. You know, because like in Ireland, we get a lot of cloud cover and the clouds sometimes blanket the heat of the sun getting in. So that's why we wouldn't get high temperatures like that. Okay, so I hope that explains why they get such high temperatures. Nighttime temperatures then are so cold they can drop down to 0 degrees Celsius. And the reason for that is, again, because they've no cloud cover, there's nothing to insulate or keep in the heat. So the heat escapes at nighttime. Because nighttime, the sun is gone. So there's nothing to keep in the heat that was there during the day because there's no cloud cover. So all the heat escapes. So there's a big difference between the daytime temperature and the nighttime temperature. Imagine going from like 40 degrees Celsius to 0 degrees Celsius. That is pretty cold at night. The lack of vegetation as well kind of has an effect because very little will grow there. There's nothing to absorb the heat, so that makes a difference. So there's very little sparse vegetation, so there's nothing to trap the heat during the day. Whereas if there's a lot of trees and vegetation and stuff, it would trap the heat and it would warm up the place. Okay, so that definitely has an effect as well. So there's a big temperature range. Okay, big temperature range. That means there's a big difference between the day and the nighttime temperatures. Okay, precipitation levels then. There's very little precipitation. Sure, it's a hot desert climate. So they have less than 250 millimeters of rain per year. To put that into context for you, Ireland on average gets about, we'll say, 1,200 millimeters of rain per year. So they only get 250 millimeters of rain. And like, look at the months of June, July and August. They get nothing at all. And it's only going to get worse with climate change. So any rain that they do get, they obviously do get rain. They get 250 millimeters of rain per year. Any rain that they do get is really rare. Okay, very, very rare. They suffer from long periods of no rain at all. So that's called drought. And when they do get rain, it comes in sudden downpours, sudden bursts. Okay? Another reason why they get such little rain, or main reason why they get such little rainfall, is because the winds that blow towards them are called the trade winds. You can see the yellow and the red arrows coming up towards the regions. They blow in towards the equator. And as the winds blow in towards the equator, obviously they get warm. And what do we know about warm air? They hold moisture. Okay, so the winds are holding the moisture, so they're keeping the area dry. So that's why they get such little rainfall. They called them the trade winds centuries and centuries ago because back in the days where they used to do a lot of shipping and sailing, it was an ideal location for people to ship around there because it was so the winds used to blow the ships into the area quite easily, so it was easy to navigate and to sail there. So that's why they get such little precipitation, because the area is so warm, because it's the equator, the heat is directly shining over them. It's keeping the air warm, the winds blowing in are heated up, and they're holding the moisture. Okay, so temperatures and precipitation are extremely important for you to know about. Just moving on, what vegetation can survive there? Well, there's very little that'll grow there. Why? Because of the intense heat and the lack of rainfall. Like vegetation, plants, shrubs, trees, they need rain to grow and to be nourished. So very little will survive there. Anything that has and that does survive in the desert and anything that will grow there has adapted to the harsh conditions. So anything that will grow there has to be able to find water underground. So for example, anything with any trees or shrubs need long roots to look for water underground. So one example of that would be the date palm tree. You've seen pictures of the palm tree loads of times, I'm sure, before. Palm trees will grow in the desert because they have long roots. They can go up to 1 meter underground. Some can even go further. And they search underground for water because obviously when it rains, water will go down to the land, okay? And it'll be stored underground. Anything that grows in the desert has to be able to store water. Now, where will it store water, says you? It stores it actually in the trunks and in the leaves of the plant. And that just helps them to survive. They have to store moisture and to store water. Anytime it rains suddenly, and any rare rain shower that comes along, the plant and the tree will store that water and keep it for times in drought. It's amazing how clever these plants are, that they know how to survive in these conditions. So the mesquite bush would be another example. It's like the day palm tree. They have long roots that go underground searching for water. The cactus survives very easily there for several reasons. The cactus has a very spongy interior. So it's like a sponge. When it rains, it absorbs the moisture. So it's like it's a storage. It stores the water inside in its spongy interior, and it survives off of that storage of water. Its skin is really, really waxy, so it actually absorbs and it holds in the moisture as well. And it's very groovy. You can see that there's a lot of grooves in cactus, and the grooves act like an accordion or a concertina, and it swells to allow the plant to swell to store more water. Okay, so it's amazing how it really has adapted to the hot conditions. Okay, animals, what animals survive there? Well, if they're going to survive there, they have to really survive the hot conditions and the lack of water. So the desert fox is very clever. He'll go into an underground burrow during the day to stay cool, and then he'll come out at the cool of night when it's cooler. What else? The jackrabbit has actually grown, imagine, longer ears to sweat out from the heat, to lose its body heat, to sweat out. The rattlesnake survives in the desert because it eats any insects and small creatures that it can find, and it gets moisture from them, imagine. So it gets its moisture from the insects and animals that it eats. The camels survive easily because of their hump. So they store water and food in their hump and fat in their hump for when, anything is scarce. They have wide hooves as well because the sand is so hot and it's so harsh in their feet. So their hooves are really thick and solid. They're well able for the harsh ground. They have very long eyelashes because of sandstorms. When the wind sometimes blows in and blows the sand really harshly over the area, their long eyelashes prevent the sand from abrading and hurting their eyes. Their nostrils will close as well when the sandstorm happens. They've really, really thick lips to allow them to eat the prickly plants like cactus and different things like that. And they'll stay at an oasis. They kind of find the oasis. The oasis is like a fertile area of the desert where there's a little spring of water. It's very rare to find them, but the camels will go there and get their water from there. Okay, so that's everything about the hot desert climate. I hope that helps.